think I hate to finish and close the networking opportunities, but please can you take your seats now? I think we should get started. So for those of you who just arrived, my name is Sandy Roberts. I sit on the committee of MLA, and I just want to give you a very warm welcome here today. I am excited about our topic for today. As many of you probably know already, I'm passionate about regenerative agriculture, and it's good to hear what's happening in the space and what other people are doing. So first up, we have the team from Cicada. We have Karen Giri, who is going to be doing the introductions, and she is brand new to Cicada, just started as the commercial director, or starting end of this month, close, as the commercial director, but ex-Kens, and has got a wealth of experience behind her. We also have Jenna van Neerkerk, who is a specialist in the agricultural and environmental space, of which she's been working about 10 years in the ESG sector, and previously worked with a private equity fund and has extensive knowledge on environmental and social due diligence. Great person to know, especially if you're from the big corporates, and how to implement ESG management. And having some experience of this myself, it can be quite a challenging transition. But anyway, we're glad to have you here, Jenna. And Jenna comes with she's a holder of a BSOC Sci honors degree in environmental and geographical science from University of Cape Town. So handing over to the Cicada team, and we're really pleased that you could join us today. And by the way, I just met Karen the other day, and I'm arm twisting her to become a member of the MLA, because I'm saying we've got great people like yourselves to network with within the community of the development, government. I haven't seen anyone from government here today. Am I missing someone from government? We know we've got some ZFU people. So from the development sector and commercial private sector. So it's a great community to be able to network in and find out what's going on in the big world. Karen, over to you.
Thank you for the warm welcome. And arm twisting up. Well, it wasn't much arm twisting that Sandy had to do, but definitely glad to be here today. Had some interactions with Michael during my time at Keynes, where we were working on resuscitating the small-scale grower scheme in Cashel to Money. So I think I've managed to find my way right to the start of the value chain, and I can say I have both end of the chain with agro-processing experience and now getting more into the production and agriculture side. So thank you so much. I'm just going to give you an overview of Cicada, and I'll just wait for the slides to come up. So whilst they're getting that started, just a brief history. So Cicada is basically about a couple of years old, unbundled out of Rift Valley Corporation. So a lot of people are more familiar with Rift Valley. And what essentially happened is the shareholders have now taken out all the non-tobacco assets and formed another group, which is what is now called Cicada. So we do function as two separate groups, although still with the same shareholder. So there's a timeline. If you can just move to the next slide. So we've just shown you a timeline just briefly. There we go. So that's just the timeline that shows our transformation, with 2018 being when Cicada was launched, Catio operations starting in 2019, and then I think of interest would be Cicada Solar, which came in 2021, and then we'll also touch base on Cicada Carbon. Where we're located, we've just shown you geographically. Our business is comprised of four key divisions, which is the agriculture division, and that holds your Makandi estates, your Catio estates, northern farming, and Chipinge bananas. We've got the forestry division, which is comprised of border timbers, and then Cicada Carbon and Cicada Solar. I won't go into too much detail because the video will also then elaborate on the businesses, but just a few highlights on each of those businesses. Makandi, based in Chipinge, mainly growing your avocados and macadamia. Again, our businesses are certified, so we do have Rainforest Alliance certification, which is expected to be completed in 2024. I'll move swiftly to the next one, which is Catio. This is the recent project where quite an extensive amount of renovation has been done. There is another story to be told there, but really a lot of hard work has gone into resuscitating Katillo and putting in the avocado plantations. And I would be very happy to tell you that today, 21st of March, is when we have kicked off our very first harvest of avocados in Katillo. So that's very exciting for us at this stage. We'll move across to Chipinge, which is the largest banana estate in Zimbabwe, located in the southeast region, and that's a joint venture with Matanuska. And so essentially we're producing about 7,000 to 8,000 tons of bananas annually in Chipinge. Then Northern Farming, this is our model farm, which is a partnership with government through ADA. And so essentially ADA also sees this as a template or a model for them. And we are growing currently for National Foods, Delta, Surface Wilma, and for the GMB. Then I'll talk a bit about Border Timbers, which I think many of you are familiar with. Border Timbers has just come through judicial management, has come out rather of judicial management. So there's exciting things happening there with some transformation starting to take place. I think key to note there is we do have FSC certification for our timber, and the pole plant is also ISO certified. So that speaks to the value that we place on sustainability practices, and Jenna really has been the heartbeat of the business, as I like to call it, ensuring that we're not just ticking boxes, but essentially we want to see the ESG mandates lived out throughout all our businesses. And another new baby is Cicada Agri-Tech, and you'll be hearing a lot more about Cicada Agri-Tech. This is our soil lab and bio lab. Currently, we're offering soil analysis services, leaf analysis, water analysis, and nematode-based tests for your soil health tests, your plant parasitic tests, and your compost maturity analysis. Very passionate guys in the lab. I had the chance to go there, and they couldn't wait to show me through the microscope to understand all the different nematodes and how you can tell by the shape of the mouth what type of nematode you're looking at. But really, the purpose of this lab is not just to give the farmers information, but be able to translate that to valuable information that you can now use to really understand the soil and how we can improve the health of our soils and maximize on our yields. So that's Cicada Agri-Tech. And Cicada Solar, again, currently has done projects of about 2.5 megawatts with a pipeline of another 10 megawatts of solar power. Some of our main projects were, or I think the largest one was TPZ with the project of about 3.2 megawatts. So I think the greatest benefit with Cicada Solar is it also offers financing options for the solar projects. So again, that's something to look forward to and watch. We've just shown you a picture now of installation of solar taking place at Charter Sawmill in Chimanimani. Jenna and I were up there about 2 weeks ago. It was blazing hot. I think we had a heat wave, but it's just great to see how the work is developing in Chimanimani with that solar project. And lastly, I'll talk about Cicada Carbon. This is where we really are looking at initiatives to drive ecosystem restoration, conservation, and carbon offset initiatives. I think to date, we've distributed 120,000 rocket stoves with plans to do another 40,000 this year. And we really are starting to see the transformation and the community starting to appreciate the work or the benefits of reducing the amount of biomass that they're using for cooking. It's also giving them time, or the children definitely, and the mothers, more time to focus on going to school and doing other things within their community. So those are some of the initiatives on Cicada. But at this point, I will now ask you to watch the screen to take a view at the video that we've prepared, and then Jenna will come up to give us a bit more information. Thank you.
The Cicada Group is a Zimbabwean agroforestry concern with significant investments in timber, macadamias, avocados, and bananas. Over the last 20 years, we have built a strong and stable platform with over 20,000 hectares of productive agricultural land, 10,000 hectares of conservation areas, and we now have over 1,000 employees. This platform gives us a unique opportunity to respond to the challenges of the 21st century. For around us, the world is in flux. Ecosystems are collapsing, the climate is changing, and even as global demand for food grows, we face a large range of existential threats. Farmers the world over need to rise to this challenge, embracing a longer-term view of profits that will benefit both people and nature, and that will lead to true prosperity. After all, agriculture is foundational. Everything we eat comes from the earth. The way we farm has the power to do great good or irreparable harm. Of course, true prosperity can only be achieved in the pursuit of clear financial incentives. But we must not view profits in isolation. When driven only by profits, farming degrades soils, pollutes rivers, damages ecosystems, emits carbon, and drives deforestation. We too have played our part in this. But we must now shift course and demonstrate a more sustainable future for agriculture. We are an important part of an ecosystem, an interdependent group of businesses, communities, habitats, and creatures. To be truly sustainable, the whole ecosystem must flourish. We only have one planet. We need to look after it. Our estates lie in the eastern highlands of Zimbabwe, which hosts 3 IUCN important biodiversity areas and several of Zimbabwe's key national parks, forests, and botanical reserves. Our footprint covers major river systems like the Pungwe and Rusitu rivers, and our estates contain important islands of remnant rainforest. These forests act as critical carbon sinks, and they also regulate water supply and contribute to healthy river systems. These fragile ecosystems host a wealth of plants and wildlife, but they are under increasing threat. Invasive weeds like bee bush and lantana are spreading fast and will soon overwhelm the few patches of forest we have left. That is why we formed restoration teams to clear dangerous and invasive exotic species from our estates.
This has all been cleared, this whole area through here. 3 months ago, it looked like Mordor. It was so dense with exotic vegetation. So it's taking a while to recover, but it's getting there. Look at this. Can't believe we've got seeds from indigenous plants already. Those saplings have really sprouted up since then. Look how quickly things can bounce back. Just amazing.
The cleared invasive weeds are then removed and chipped with a mobile chipper to be made into compost. The compost is turned regularly, and when it is broken down, it is applied to our plantation trees, reducing our fertilizer usage. Of course, making enough compost for our large plantations is a huge undertaking, and we have only just begun this journey. But reductions in toxic chemical use leads to healthier soils, and this is one of our key aims.
I think that the whole idea of monoculture is what we're trying to address. Get pest build-up, get disease build-up, and it just gets worse and worse each year.
This is why we have begun to trial regenerative agriculture techniques.
We understand beyond the shadow of a doubt that that's what has to be done. And so the introduction of the cattle into the fields, the introduction of the sheep, they are keeping the grass down, clearly, which saves us on mowing. They're providing manure for the compost. And yeah, they're restoring what we hope is a bit of a balance back into the farmland, the soil.
We're also experimenting with improved pest management using poultry, like turkeys, which control harmful pests and minimize the need for dangerous pesticides. With reduced chemical use, we can also improve the purity of our rivers, ensuring that the water leaves our estates cleaner than when it entered.
A river is really just a lens of the catchment through which it flows. You can tell so much about the health of the catchment, the health of everything around it by what's concentrated in that river. There are a lot of agrochemicals and fertilizers coming in here. There is massive siltation from mining, from streamside cultivation. On every level there are issues with what's coming in there. If we turn over some rocks, I can definitely show you the sort of things we're looking for. Ah, that's exciting. I found a plecopteran as well. They are so sensitive. I know for the length of the time that that animal has been alive, this water has been clean. It's much cleaner already. It's already clean from the bridge down to here, hugely since it's been on this estate. So it's very, very encouraging.
In line with our net zero carbon pledge, over the next 20 years, we have set aside a world-leading 30% of our estates for conservation areas, which we will rewild, removing water-hungry invasive weeds from catchments, eliminating riverbank cultivation, and replanting indigenous trees.
We have done a huge stretch to say 30% at least of each estate will be put under conservation. And we're trying to link those, make sure that they're corridors. So any wildlife that exists in one part of that has actually got a safe corridor, can move through to another.
This means ecosystems will regenerate, dried up streams will flow once more, and islands of forests will once again be linked to create wildlife corridors, restoring the balance between man and nature. But we can only build a thriving business if we put people first. We are committed to the well-being of our workers, not only through the payment of a living wage, but we also provide social services like schooling, health, and recreation. But our estates must not become islands of prosperity. We need to share our economics and values with the communities around us. Beyond our borders, habitats are under even worse threat as people tackle poverty using the only asset they have available, their natural resources. We need to provide them with financial opportunities that are tied to responsible stewardship of the land. This is why we have developed our Outgrower scheme. We want to share our prosperity and values with those outside our borders. Dennis joined the scheme this year, where he receives grafted export-quality Haas Avo trees, which will hugely increase his income, in exchange for which he must clear invasive exotic species like lantana and bananas from the riverbeds, replant indigenous trees, and protect the natural bush. In a few years, he will supply us with export-quality fruit. Our supply chain will be expanded, and his forests and streams will regenerate.
Ini ndakabva ndatotema mabanana ari mudhuze nerwizi kuti ndiwe nechidakadaka chekuzvara miti yemusango kuti rwizi rwedu ruchengeteke mupopi river. Saka tikasima miti mvura yedu inodzoka pachinyakare zvayanga iri kare kare. Uye kana wazvara miti ziva kuti manje watoita kukama nezvipuka zvesango. Dzingave shiri dzinowe kana dzikauya dzikamharawo miti so haubvumirwi kubaya shiri idzodzo ishamwari.
To drive change, we need to educate and inspire the next generation. Moses lives on the Katio estate. Every morning he walks to school at Chisuko Secondary School, where field officers like Tilda teach the students about conservation agriculture and ecosystem regeneration.
I work with the agriculture teacher, so I'll be teaching the kids conservation farming.
Nhasi tadyara miti tikaisa mulching beans. Saka tagadzira compost manure yedu.
Ndinonzi Chantel. Ndiri head girl paChisuko Secondary School. Totema lantana just because hapana mumwe miti inozokwanisa kumera pasi payo or even pa area inenge iri. Indigenous trees tinoidyara kuti tiwane mweya kufema pazvandaona miti ikatemwa panoitika soil erosion. So it is the best kusima miti yakawanda than kutema.
It feels so good to come back to this school. I need to teach the kids. You need to pay back to your community.
The task before us is huge. It requires both significant investment and a commitment from all our stakeholders. So our strategy has been designed not only to make long-term business sense, but also to enhance the lives of the communities we depend upon and to look after the earth for future generations. If we don't rise to this challenge, our last remaining ecosystems may disappear, and the opportunities we have to make a difference for the next generation may be lost.
Success, we can look at incrementally as well. It's like, are we better this year than last year?
At my age group, we probably had our heads in the sand far too long. Yeah, we just need to get on and do something about it.
Uye kuti izvi tiri kuitira remangwana redu kuva mhuri dzedu idzi tiri kubereka kuti vazive kuti muti wakakosha uye rwizi rwakakosha.
Cicada, with its platform of people, natural resources, commitment, and imagination, is uniquely placed to deliver this vision of true prosperity. We cannot be an island. We are part of the ecosystem, one organism amongst many. If any part of that ecosystem fails, we all fail. We must give back to the soil what we take out. We must provide opportunities for people to flourish. We must restore balance as we create a profitable, brighter future. Cicada, growing better.
It's quite long. Maybe you can just go back to the presentation. But I think that video, it's kind of just a video that we prepared to give everybody a good idea of, 12-minute overview of the initiatives that we undertake. And I think something that is very critical in our strategy is that sustainability is just not a single pillar on its own. It really runs through our entire business. And the way we do business is all based on sustainability, not just environmental and social, but obviously also financial, because that's what pays for these initiatives that we need to undertake, but it also has a synergistic relationship. I'll take questions, but I'll just go through. So obviously based off that video, one of the things that you would have seen is that we have a good relationship with our surrounding communities, and we don't view our estates on their own as just islands of prosperity. We want to make sure that our surrounding communities buy into the values that we believe in, and that we give them the right skills and tools to be able to do that as well. So we have a small scale project, which is located around Hondi Valley. So currently we have 100 farmers there and growing to 300 next year. We have small scale farmers in Gairezi as well. And then we also have in Karoi, both growing 200 to 300 respectively. We have a target of 2030 to have 5,000 outgrowers. And the aim is that what we do is we'll engage a small scale farmer, and they will then have to undertake conservation agriculture under the guidance of our agronomists, and they get provided inputs, and they grow 1 to 2 seasons of beans or maize. And if they are successful in that, along with doing the other initiatives like removing, so stopping riparian cultivation, removing of alien invasive species, replanting indigenous species, they are then invited to participate in our AVO and MAC schemes. And we're also doing coffee now as well. And the long-term plan is that then they will then feed into our value chain, and they'll be able to benefit from a scale perspective as well as a skills perspective. But we're really seeing really good results. And for example, we've just recently got some reports from Gairezi where despite obviously poor rains and oncoming drought, yield improvements of between 100 and 250% on their maize, which speaks for itself to the methods that we're helping them implement. You saw in the video, we obviously trying to move towards regenerative agriculture. This is obviously challenging with avos because of global gap. However, we are allowed to have livestock in our max, but also what we've done at Katia, we've just launched a community livestock program where the community, we had a problem particularly at Katia where the livestock were coming onto the property, and areas that we had rewilded and planted beautiful brand new saplings, which the goats really like, they were eating it. And so basically all of our hard work was going to waste. So what we've done is we've engaged with them, and we've actually taken on their cattle and their goats and their sheep. We provide security for them at night. We have herdsmen. We provide them with veterinary services, and then they pay a monthly fee to us. So it's a twofold relationship because they obviously get good care for their livestock, but then we also are able to manage them properly, but also use them for fire control, mowing, and then manure as well. Maybe we can just go to the next slide, please. And we plan to scale that up across our estates. There was mention in the video of bee bush. Bee bush is a massive issue across the Eastern Highlands. At all of our forestries, well, Sheba and Bears are not so much, but Charter and Tilbury, it is such a huge issue, and it's so challenging. It costs so much to manage it, but we have to. And I mean, as a lot of you will know, bee bush loves degraded areas. So through the whole Chimani Mani, Chipingi and Hondi Valley, anywhere that's degraded and has had deforestation, this bee bush has just gone absolutely wild. And then when seeding season comes, it's just a complete nightmare. So we do have 2 dedicated rewilding teams consisting of 24 people. Currently, they're located at Tilbury and Resitu. And, you know, we've got targets for them each month of removal of bee bush. And then over a certain period, they hand back restoration to the estates. But it's an uphill battle, and we're learning a lot of lessons. But it's something we, at a policy level, want to engage with Emma and the Ministry of Agriculture, because it's just such a huge issue in that area. But just a few pictures. So, I mean, we've got Isaac here, who the picture on the left is him in 2023. He's been in the scheme for a couple of years. He's now got his avos, which are interplanted with maize. And that picture, which was taken in Jan 24, I was there. He actually, it was a late planting, rain-fed, and with no tillage, composting and mulching. He actually hadn't had to do any weeding. And I mean, his crop was looking really good. So we really are seeing, it's not just anecdotal, we really are seeing on the ground, you know, successes out of this. We've got Anna, she's just, she's in near Aberfoyle, forget the name of the area now, but she's now got coffee plants. So we're doing a combination of maize, coffee and avos. The coffee grows well under the avos. And then Kumbarai and his wife there, it's another success story. Kumbarai actually started as a small scale farmer in our team, and he's actually now one of our Cicada field officers. He's really taken on board conservation agriculture techniques and is now providing that additional knowledge to other members of the small scale scheme. We now have a Katia training center, which I think recently opened, like about a month ago. And so we are now providing, everybody who comes into our conservation agriculture small scale scheme has to undergo a conservation agriculture training program. We've got a training school at Ridings in Karoi, at Katio. So yeah, I mean, we are really spending a lot of money out of this with the long-term view that this will eventually pay back, obviously to the community, to Cicada, and to the environment. So like I said, sustainability really runs through our whole business. And basically I joined Cicada about a year ago, and my biggest focus has been on finalizing and implementing our sustainability strategy. Our sustainability strategy is built on 3 pillars: 1, finite planet, people first, and measurable impact. Measurable impact for us is really important because it's all fine showing you guys a really pretty video of what's happening, but if we can't actually measure and illustrate and also be able to interrogate and validate the results we're seeing, it actually means nothing. We are in the process of committing to SBTI, which is the Science-Based Targets Initiative, which is a climate-related commitment. And the Science-Based Target Network also has nature-based targets, which are currently being piloted with, I think, about 16 sort of like blue chip international companies, which will then be rolled out. But we're doing a lot of work to make sure that across our sustainability strategy, we're measuring the right things, that when it comes to biodiversity standards, we've got what's needed to be able to then comply with those. So I'll just give you a super quick overview, and then if you've got specific questions, you can let me know. But under One Finite Planet, what we've done is we split into indicators. So these are things, regardless of whatever we do, we can measure them. Soil health, biodiversity, water quality, and productivity. This is obviously being implemented in a phased approach because it's a lot of work and can't be done all in one go. But for example, on soil health, what we're doing is we're measuring soil organic carbon. We have baselines, and that's being done in plantation and within our rewilded areas, so that, because obviously they're completely different, and we've got targets which are aligned with international best practice on how we want to increase our soil organic carbon. And I think our target is 0.4% per year increase in our soil organic carbon within our plantations. Biodiversity, so with our rewilded areas, there's a lot of work that goes on. So an area that's been degraded, we obviously have to go and remove it, alien invasive species, replant indigenous species that are meant to be there, and then monitor those and make sure we protect them, and over time measure the increase in biodiversity. So not only the increase, but the quality. So we're looking at ecosystem conditions and how do we measure that? Again, not an easy thing. We're at the beginning of the journey and trying to figure out in certain aspects the best way to measure all of this and be able to verify it. I mean, I think everybody's kind of a fay with Vera gold standard on carbon credits. They also have a biodiversity standard. So that's probably something we will be targeting in the next few years in terms of a verifiable way of measuring what we're doing. Water quality, you saw the video. It's a massive issue. We have a lot of chemicals coming into our states from externally. So we want to measure what's coming in, what's the improvement through our state, and then also how can we engage with our community to teach them to stop polluting their rivers, because it's not just in our best interest, it's also in everybody's best interest. EIQ management, so I'll just quickly go through it so I don't bore you guys too much. But chemicals are a massive issue. I think anybody in the agricultural space knows that there's a lot of chemicals that you can't use under certifications, but there's also certain things like, for example, in the macadamia industry, imidacloprid is a pretty standard chemical to be used. This is to treat stink bug, but what we've done at Resitu, we started last year, we had a 5-hectare trial. It's been increased to 18 hectares this year, and it's going up to 72 hectares next year, where we've been trialing wasps. And what happens is the wasps then hatch and then they kill the stink bug eggs. And we did a sample of our 18 hectares recently, I think about a month ago at Makandi, and we had no stink bug damage. So we're obviously going to increase that to 72 hectares with a view to, I think our 2050 target, which I know is a long way away, is to be biological. But our 2030 target is to decrease our EIQ rating to 50%. So if anybody doesn't really know what EIQ, so that's your environmental impact quotient of your chemicals. Every single chemical has a rating to it, and based on like how bad it is to invertebrates, vertebrates, humans, etc. So we track all of our chemical usage, what's sprayed, how much is used, and what the EIQ is, and how that compares to what we've budgeted. And so we have a baseline from 2023, and our target is to reduce that EIQ by 50% to 2030. So it's very ambitious, especially in light of the fact that some chemicals are not allowed in Zimbabwe. That would be options. So from a policy perspective, we, trying to see how we can engage with regulatory authorities to get some of these chemicals in. And I won't be able to tell you exactly what they all are, because we've got an ecologist and farm managers for that as well. But rewilding and conservation, 30% of our estates have been earmarked for rewilding, and we're on that journey already. That's aligned with the Kunming-Montreal protocol. And then we track our carbon emissions, but we're going a step further with the SBTi commitment, and that will go through to scope 3. And there's a very detailed flag guidance associated with that, which we think will be beneficial, because we'll then be able to see, how much we're capturing in terms of our AVO and our MAC trees. So if anybody hasn't looked in it, I would highly recommend you do, because there are a lot of positive benefits to, understanding it and potentially committing to it. People first, obviously, living wage was mentioned. So what we've done, there's the anchor and anchor methodology under the Global Wage Coalition. We're using that methodology to build our own living wage assessment, but currently we work off a $4 a day minimum wage. So that's your A1 employees, and everybody gets paid above that. Basically, our view is that whatever we set as our basic living wage, regardless of what NEC is, we will always pay the higher of the two. We understand the peculiarities of our environment with regards to currency. Health and safety, I mean, I think a lot of those there are pretty standard. Going forward, supply compliance, we're building a supplier compliance policy, and we want to do supply compliance audits so that we make sure up and downstream we're getting as much compliance as possible and have people buying into the same values that we have, because again, it's no point being an island of prosperity. And I think measurable impact I've kind of already covered. I don't know if there's any more slides. And this was just, I mean, if anybody wants a presentation, you can take it. This just gives a bit more detail on each thing. So, I mean, it's really not lip service from Cicada. I mean, obviously, this is a great audience to be able to get our story out there. Finance in this country is a massive challenge to be able to implement a lot of these sort of initiatives. I'm glad to see some banks in the room who are, going for GEF funding, Global Environmental Fund. We have so many things that we want to do. Funding remains a massive issue, but we have such great shareholder support that we're able to, get on this journey and really start implementing a lot of these initiatives so that we're producing a quality crop. We've got good yields, but we're also looking after the ecosystems we rely on. We understand that 20 years from now, we can't just pillage everything and then not be able to produce anything for ourselves and our communities. Thanks. That is it from me.
So this is for question and answer.
Great. Yeah, please, if you wouldn't mind. We need to go that side. So, and my apologies to all of you that are online. I completely missed in the introductions of recognizing you. So you are welcome in this meeting as well. And I hope next time you're going to actually be in the room with us. How many people do we have online, Tony? About 22 people. So please feel free to put in the message box, because Tony's going to man that. If we can just put in the message box any of your questions, because we don't want to miss out on what you have to say. But right now, just opening up to the audience for you to ask our expert here in the house. Thank you for that. It's exciting to see that a corporation like Cicada is, I would say, paving the way. I don't see too many other corporates. Maybe I'm wrong. Are there other corporates that are doing the similar sort of thing? What about Econet? What about Delta? What about the other big dogs that are out there? So thank you for paving the way. It's great. Well done. Right. Audience, questions. Have you got any? Bamboozled. So we're going to give this. Okay.
Thanks, Jenna. Is Cicada able to access premium markets with its green approach? Yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of the guys in the room will understand that obviously with Global Gap and SMETA, those are pretty standard requirements for AVOs, for example. We are part of Golden Max, so Golden Max have their own standard. But for example, with the recent FSC certification of our timber estates, yes, we now, I mean, this is a lot of the work that Karen's going to be doing. Something we are trying to work hard towards is now unlocking those markets because of the work that we're doing and because of the story we can tell and because we're going to have verifiable information to illustrate the impact that we're having. So partially, I mean, I think the AVO market, I think we've got some big sort of like distributors there, Westphalias of the world, who obviously hold a strong arm, but we definitely want to see how we can tap into those higher paying markets because of what we're doing. But we're definitely seeing it in timber. We have more demand than we can supply for our poles, for example, because of FSC and also ISO certification. And we are seeing a lot of interest now from financiers who have, impact targets they need to achieve. They have sustainability directives that they have to comply with, and they're looking for good businesses that have strong sustainability strategies. And again, it's the measurable impact and being able to verify what you say you're doing. So it's a slow and arduous journey accessing this financing, but we're seeing, particularly in the last 3 months, we've seen a lot more interest and a lot more engagement with the local banks as well as DFIs. Yeah. Yes.
So just from my experience within sort of the corporate sector and also following climate initiatives quite closely, it's almost getting to the stage where if you're not compliant, you won't be able to access the market rather than getting a higher price. So it's not like organic that you can maybe get a 10, 15% margin on your organic produce. And I know that there's other COP28 that they're talking about the big corporates, Unilever, Danone, all of those guys are talking about, I'm not sure how far they are on the implementation. By 2030, they want to be able to source all the product coming from regenerative produce, regeneratively suppliers, that sort of thing. So if you're not compliant, you could possibly miss out on the market rather than, being a price premium.
Yeah. And to add to that, under the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, there's, a range of things that European companies have to comply with. And like a big one is going to be able to illustrate a zero deforestation supply chain. So these are really issues that it's really important that, ZIM is very exciting to a lot of people, but I think we have the opportunity to be, paving the way and taking note of these issues. And it's not just, like I said, it's not just for the company, but, larger perspective. So yeah, as you said, markets are going to be closed off to suppliers who won't be able to comply and be able to measure certain aspects. So we're implementing from our financial year runs from July, we're going to be implementing our global reporting initiative. IFRS S1 and S2 have to be done by listed entities, and listed entities have to comply with a very small portion of the GRI indicators. So it's already happening. ZIM is actually an early adopter of IFRS S1 and S2. So people have to get on board. It's difficult, but you've got to get on the journey. Yeah.
Any other questions? Sorry, please can you give your name, your organization, because Jenna doesn't know everyone in the room, and it would be really helpful to give context.
All right, thanks, Jen. Rodney from the Agricultural Partnership Trust. Maybe just to get a bit of context on how you managed to convince the farmers to bring the livestock together for the company to control.
Yeah.
I think us in the development sector, we have tried to play around with this idea, particularly trying to control the disease and trying to control the pastures. What challenges did you face? Are these animals ear tagged? And also, what are the socio-economic characteristics of these farmers and sort of educational level of these farmers? I just want to see the differences and maybe some lessons we can draw from your experience.
No.
Gonna do stoves.
Yes.
Going in the direction.
One of the key things is obviously stakeholder engagement. So a key aspect of our people first is that we engage our communities around us. And it is challenging because you've got an estate like Katio where you've got hundreds of hectares of avos and max, and then you're telling people around you, hey, you're not allowed to grow your maize and cut down trees. Why should they listen to you? So we've definitely taken the perspective that there's got to be value to them, but that community engagement and ensuring that their voice is heard, they understand what we're doing, what our aims are, and that we're not just there to exploit the farmers around us. So for example, with the livestock, Brendan, who's the farm manager there, as well as the other farm managers, have a good relationship with the community heads. For example, we just had launched a forest called the Paul Mortimer Forest on our estate, which is a massive area of rewilding. And, we engaged the community on the launch of that. So it's just really having that community relationship. And then we didn't want to have conflict with them, with their livestock coming onto the estate, and it was getting to that point where it was really challenging to, you know, they were bringing their cattle and their sheep and goats on at night. So we said, look, guys, you have a challenge with disease. We have a challenge that we really don't want your livestock eating our brand new saplings or going into plantations that they're not supposed to go into, and provided them a solution that we don't make any money off it, but they get, I think it's $5 a cow, $1 a sheep or a cattle. They get, they do get eared, or branded. I mean, they have to get branded. You know, so now you also, it's one of those things where now we've got kids who are herdsmen who are now able to go to school because they're not having to, you know, take the cattle and the livestock out to graze. So it's not easy because we have some farmers that we go to around us who say, well, I don't really care about conservation agriculture. Why should I? But when the guy next door to Isaac sees, hey, like Isaac has just got avos, Isaac's maize is looking really good and he gets the same rain as I do. Like, what is he doing different? And then he's getting massively improved yields. Something I didn't mention is we then actually buy the maize off of our small scalers. So they're given, they've got a market, like a guaranteed market. We really are trying to build a circular economy as well. So that maize goes to, you know, food packs that we supply to our employees. Yeah, so it's challenging, and obviously the larger the scale gets, the broader your stakeholder management has to be. But it's really not throwing solutions at community members. It's really engaging them, seeing what their challenges are, seeing what has and hasn't worked for them. There's no point telling somebody to grow beans if they don't want to. Do you know what I mean? So making sure that they understand, you know, the concept behind the avos, what's going to happen, how long does it take, like the information. You can't just give Isaac an avo tree and then next year he's like, well, where are my avos? Like, you know, it doesn't work that way. So that education engagement, and making sure the solution you offer them is something that they need. Yeah. And we do, like, it's not always a pretty story. We have some guys around us who are like, we don't care, we're going to cut down the trees and plant maize and grow it, you know, in the normal way. So we would like conservation agriculture to become the normal way of growing crops. So yeah.
Maybe one last question. The online question. Okay, so let's give the online folk a chance.
So it's Thierry from he appreciates your presentation.
Thank you.
On the sustainability framework, people first.
Yeah.
Is Cicada giving communities opportunities to take up shareholding beyond employees, any other investments in the community development services, for example, infrastructure, health, education?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. No, from a shareholding perspective, it's not something that we've done like a community share scheme yet. But we do a lot of development with the community. So we have a CSR budget. We've definitely found in the communities that we engage with, schooling and making sure that teachers can get to school is a massive issue. So I think Makandi actually last year at the ESG Awards won a Community Empowerment Award for all of the initiatives that we've done there. And like I said, a massive one that we focused on has been enabling teachers to get to school with the provision of fuel, also the provision of like non-export grade avos from a food perspective. When there are disasters, making sure that infrastructure, as far as, you know, as far as it is within our means, can be rehabilitated. Our training center is for the community. You know, they're learning critical skills there. Yeah, I mean, we do a lot. We've got a internship program at Border Timbers, and we've got quite a few other things in the pipeline. One of our targets in terms of community is that going forward, 50% of all new hires at our estates will be from the community. That's like the minimum target. Yeah, so there's a lot of work with the community to make sure that we've got that ongoing relationship with them. Yeah.
Another question here. Sorry, this is Max from Shangani Holistic.
All the way from Weru.
Welcome, Max. This is a suggestion, would be nice for companies in the sustainability space to come together and share experiences. And he's suggesting maybe MLA could organize something. And then a question, do you make use of indigenous knowledge systems?
Yes, definitely. So particularly from a rewilding perspective, you know, we have people in the Hondi Valley, for example, who have lived there for years and years and years, know certain species that have existed that are no longer there or that they are not as prominent, animal species, bird species, you know, looking back at what has worked from a farming perspective. So 100%, you know, community and indigenous knowledge is really important to understanding the historical context. Like in the case of Katio, we've only been there since 2019. I mean, I think everybody knows Katio was a tea estate before we got there. And making sure that we tap into that, definitely from a rewilding, biodiversity, and lessons learned perspective. Yeah.
Great question. So if I can just take one more question from the floor here, and then we'll transition to Dr. Dube.
All right.
No, there's one more.
Thank you. It's Robert from TIMB.
Hi, Robert.
The Tobago people.
We know the tobacco people. It's okay.
No, I just wanted to find out your experience with farmers in Karoi.
Yes.
How has it been, and what is it that you're doing exactly there?
Yeah, so I mean, I wish Guy was here, who runs our small-scale conservation farming project, but he's had a good experience with them. Obviously, it's difficult from a climatic perspective, but they are seeing really good results on their maize and their beans under the conservation agriculture. All of the farmers there have undergone the conservation agriculture training. And as I mentioned there, we have a training center at Ridings. It's kind of twofold in that there is conservation tobacco there as well. Obviously, we as Cicada don't engage in conservation tobacco, but we've got an SLA with Northern Tobacco to be able to provide their farmers with the necessary training. So, I mean, you know, I know that you'll understand from a tobacco perspective, deforestation is a massive issue. Farming practices are a massive issue. Nematicides in tobacco is a massive issue. So we are providing some training and technical expertise for basically regenerative tobacco, which I think is really forward-looking for Northern Tobacco to be able to even consider that. They're doing massive trials on biologicals. But yeah, our small-scale farmers on the maize and bean side, we're seeing good results under very tough conditions. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. No. Nematodes is something that we've gone over and above. Obviously, it's quite a new, yeah, I mean, Scott, who's at the lab, is very passionate. So if you ever want to have a chat to him about nematodes, just put like 2 hours aside. But yeah, there's obviously a lot of indicators from nematodes that can tell you about soil health. So Scott is doing a lot of work on that to understand what exactly is it going to tell you. But from a reporting perspective, no, I mean, maybe I should just highlight, like, from a reporting perspective, GRI, your SPTNs, all of those kind of things.
Okay, translate.
So sorry, so SPTI, that's the climate targets, and then you've got your nature-based targets, but under GRI, which is Global Reporting Initiative, which is one of, there's quite a few sustainability reporting standards that one can comply with. You don't necessarily have to publish your information publicly. You can get it assured and then publish it publicly, which we are going to be doing, I think, FY26. But the indicators don't go quite as far as like a nematode community analysis. Soil organic carbon is one of them. But then again, you've got to undertake a materiality assessment, understand if these topic standards apply to you. But when you are in the agricultural space, you have to implement the flag standard, and then there's a lot more materiality to you as well. So sustainability reporting from like a GRI perspective or the Sustainability Standards Board, there are quite a lot of complex things that you need to do, but it wouldn't go as far and as technical as a lot of the stuff that we're doing. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You can see the wealth of knowledge. Sorry. Jenna, thank you so much once again. And I know there's lots more questions that I'm sure you want to ask Jenna. I don't know if you got business cards, but you're going to be here at the end. Yeah. People can capture you then. Okay, but also in the room, we've got Hugo Wingfield, who's been doing some trial work on felt management. Hugo, do you want to just raise your hand? At Art Farm. And is there anyone else that's doing corporate sustainability work in the room that might be interested in coordinating and collaborating? Just kind of raise your hand. No, development community. Rodney, I know you are. Okay, so we've got a few in the development community. Okay, that's awesome. So please feel free to grab Karen and Jenna at the end here. Right, moving on to our next speaker, and we're really pleased to invite Dr. Dube. And I'm not going to try and pronounce his first name. I'm going to leave that to you, sir. But Dr. Dube has his PhD in economics, has done agricultural economics throughout from BSc and his master's. He currently is working in the Climate Finance and Sustainability Division of the Infrastructure Development Bank of Zimbabwe, IDBZ, and he leads the Climate Finance and Sustainability team in strategic planning and identification of new program areas while ensuring consistency with IDBZ's strategic plan, national development plans, and other climate change management global priorities. And for those of you who are not aware, in Zimbabwe, in the Ministry of Agriculture, we do have part of climate in our strategic plans, pillar number 8. So if you ever get a chance to look at the document, there's some strategic plans there, which is great. Dr. Dube, handing over to you and a very warm welcome. And as I say, I'll leave you to pronounce your first name.
Okay. Thank you. I don't know if this is working.
Is that one? Oh, you've got one. Perfect. Okay. You want to stand here because we've got people online.
Oh, okay. All right.
That will need to.
Okay, afternoon, everyone. I hope I'm audible. Okay, so my name is Ngobizita. Ngobizita, which means conqueror of all enemies. Yeah. Ngobizita Dube. I am with the Infrastructure Development Bank of Zimbabwe. I lead the Climate Climate Finance and Sustainability Division. And well, I was asked to come here to talk a bit about the green economy, try to understand what we discuss when we talk about the green economy. So essentially, I thought, well, most likely I'm going to be preaching to the choir. Most people understand exactly what climate change is, what it is about. But I thought, oh, well, maybe let me just recap a bit and explain what we are talking about when we're discussing climate. And then I thought, okay, we have to also talk about why we think it's important to go green, as well as trying to look at the basic financial instruments that are being used in the attempt to go green. So why do we discuss the green economy in the first place? So the realization was that for the rational economic agent, it's very difficult to get their attention if you don't discuss dollars and cents. So most people are really not interested in environmental protection until you start telling them what they get out of it. So most projects that came up initially tried to create that idea of evaluation of the natural environment. So the only way that we pay attention is when we say, okay, wildlife is worth so much in the campfire program. Then we will start protecting wildlife. So the green economy, essentially, it is a double-edged sword because technically it sounds like you really do not care about the environment. You are still pursuing money, but money is actually the one that brought us to the problems that we feel we're having now. So it's a very strange space to be in, but we agree that generally for people to really pay attention to most things, they tend to look at it from a money perspective. So there are many dimensions of the green economy. It's not only climate. There are many spaces heralded by the likes of wildlife management in the campfire program. That's the communal areas management program for indigenous resources, pioneered in Zim, and I think did fairly well and actually got communities interested in managing the natural environment. Why we discuss climate is because it's the biggest dimension that we're talking of in the green space, in the green economy. And a lot of people want to really understand exactly what it is that happens, what sort of financing is available, but multiple dimensions around the payment for general ecosystem services is what we are really looking at. So if we have an ecosystem service, how do we show its value to everyone else? And how do we pay for it? Thereby, how do we create some economics around it? And then we call this economics green economics. So I have deliberately focused on climate change because it's, as I said, the biggest part. But I thought, well, as I said, preaching to the choir, most of you know what climate change is. You know what causes it. but I'll still just repeat just in case someone maybe has forgotten. So what is climate change? Climate change really is a problem of an increase in temperature. An increase in temperature, which we argue is a result of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, primarily carbon dioxide. So some people argue, but no, but the climate has always been changing. We've had ice ages, we've had this and that. Why do you say the problem is with us now? Volcanoes erupt all the time and they emit so much greenhouse gases. How is the problem ours? So if you look at the data, you'll notice that I just put up some diagrams there that show the oscillations of carbon dioxide over time, almost 1 million years. And you see that the oscillation, if you were to draw a regression line through it, is almost a flat regression line, which has got predictable movements in the amount of carbon dioxide. But by the time you get to the Industrial Revolution, there's a serious change where we start seeing a serious spike in the amount of carbon dioxide that is actually emitted on the planet. So the argument is that change is not normal. Something has changed that we're now doing differently. And we have argued that we have been the change. It is us and our processing and things that we do that have caused that change. So because of that change, we now have an imbalance in the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and they create a blanket layer around the planet. And then this blanket layer results in the radiation that is coming from the sun not going out as it came in. So a bit of it stays in and starts bouncing between the planet and that blanket. This bouncing is what we term radiative forcing. Radiative forcing, as you know, if something bounces, it creates heat. When this heat is created, it melts the polar icebergs. When polar icebergs are melted, you have an imbalance between fresh water and salt water. And now, instead of currents and winds meeting each other at a particular time, because fresh water is lighter than salty water. As a result, fresh water is moving faster. And if you've got now more fresh water than you had before, the winds are moving faster than they were. So the Benguela current, which is supposed to be coming that way from Mozambique, from Angola, does not meet the Mozambican current, and then we have a drought. So technically, this is what we talk about when we're discussing climate change, the disturbance of the global thermal highland. The thermal highland is the global conveyor belt that moves the winds, moves everything. And because of this dumping of fresh water into the oceans, you have these problems. So we then realized that we have to do something about it. So the UNFCCC was formed mostly around this idea. The initial dimensions were everything has to be focused on reducing greenhouse gases, which is what in climate change parlance would call mitigation. So mitigation was primarily the main dimension that was thought to deal with the problems related to climate. And for a very long time, the focus was on ensuring that we reduce the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. But soon it became clear that no, but the people who have emitted the least in terms of greenhouse gases are suffering the most. So there is need to actually deal with their challenges. And because most of the challenges that were occurring to the global south were related to droughts, challenges in food and so on, this brought in the dimension of adaptation. But adaptation is a private affair. It is an in-country affair. It does not deal with the rest of the world. Whereas mitigation, when we reduce greenhouse gases in Brazil, it's good for everyone else. So for a very long time, financing was moving towards mitigation, and very little was coming towards adaptation. So there have been deliberate efforts now to try and say, on the global financing systems and the financial markets, we need to start deliberately focusing on that sort of financing that deals with adaptation issues. But adaptation issues affect mostly the global south, the poorer nations. You are not likely to get loans paid back. You're not likely to get financing that is going to give you profits. You're not likely to get any financing that is going to attract a private investor. So most adaptation financing then tends to be grant-based financing, not very attractive to the big financiers. So we still have a bias, therefore, particularly in private sector-based financing that is focusing on mitigation projects that attempt to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So more money is going towards solar plants, geothermal energy, and things like, in comparison to helping people with droughts, helping people with challenges of floods, and so on and so on. So there is less and less financing going towards disaster risk financing in comparison to financing going towards profitable mitigation projects. This then brings dimensions such as, are we doing the right thing? Is it correct that we have a global system like that? How can we ensure that we have got equal financing going both sides? It becomes worse when financing is now private sector based, because the private sector is not going to be interested in people who are suffering from low yields and things like that. So therefore, how do we bring this space in a just way that allows things to change? In the mitigation space, a lot has been discussed around renewable energy, but again, you get the same challenges. How do we go renewable in the global south when we already have an energy deficit? We already have a serious energy deficit, serious energy poverty. So we need to use the fossil fuels actually to get ourselves beyond the energy deficit. But again, the mitigation dimension says we need to push ourselves to renewable energy. So energy has suddenly become an adaptation concept as well, particularly in the global south. Now, how do we bring all this together from the financing side? It soon became clear that bilateral financing was not going to cut it, because bilateral financing was between country to country, and it was focused on those issues that the two countries had to deal with. And in most cases, the recipient country did not have enough power to really say, this is what I want to get financed, this is what I want to get done. So it was important, therefore, to form the multilateral climate financing platforms. The multilateral climate financing platforms ideally were supposed to give more power to the global south, to say, now you decide what you want to be financed. You decide what you want us to deal with. You decide the adaptation and mitigation division of the financing that we have. This led to the formation of funds such as the Green Climate Fund, which is the biggest climate financing platform on the planet. There are many other funds that are like it, multilateral in nature. The GEF, which is not technically a fund, but a secretariat to the funds. You have the Adaptation Fund, you have the Least Development Country Fund. Now we also have the Loss and Damage Fund. But all these funds are ideally supposed to be empowering the global south, but they are very, very difficult to access. You see? So ideally, they're supposed to be working with us to make things better, but the proposal is so difficult to get to. The technical capacity that you need to do, it's so difficult. Just the accreditation process is difficult. At the moment in the country, there's only one accredited entity, and let me say 1.5. So we are hoping FBC is going to be joining IDBZ very soon as an accredited entity to the GCF, but it took us almost 5 years to get accredited. From concept development to actual project realization of cash will take about 3 to 4 years. So by the time you get the money, so many things have changed. The people you wanted to help have left. So really, are these things really helping us? So there's a lot of debate in the climate financing world to say, are we really getting value for this? This results in us saying, maybe we need internal climate financing platforms. So we have created in the bank the Climate Finance Facility that ideally is supposed to support local initiatives that deal with the green space, particularly the climate space. There are many others. You also have the bilateral sections are still available. You also have specific funds that deal with specific issues. For instance, funds that deal with renewable energy, funds that deal with forestry, and so on. But all of them are managed generally by the UN through the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which has got the Paris Agreement as this main agreement. And every year we meet and 15,000 people fly on many jets. Someplace. This year we're going to Azerbaijan. Last year we're in Dubai. I wonder how much pollution will actually cause. Then we meet every time at COP, which is the Conference of Parties, where we go and discuss how to make the green economy better. I don't know if it's really working. So the last part that I just want to highlight are the climate financing platforms in the major areas that we have. So the main reason why we discuss the green economy and finance and any green finance really is based on the realization that on our own, we're not interested. That is the truth. We are really not interested in the green stuff. Very few people, yes, would be interested. But every time when you bring it up, everyone says, no, it's too risky. The costs are too high. How am I going to do such a feasibility study? If it's there, then am I going to get my money back? Blah, blah. It does not make investment sense, doesn't make business sense. So the first form of financing that we always try to find is that sort of financing that reduces the transaction costs of getting into the green space. This is what we call de-risking financing. The financing that reduces the risk of me setting up a huge solar farm instead of just a simple thermal power station that I know is going to work. So we usually get the sort of financing from the climate change management platforms, that is the Green Climate Fund and so on. Their real function is to come in where you say, if you had not come here, the rest of the people are not going to pay attention. But if you bring in your money, then we are going to have a level of de-risking and a level of concessionality that is going to be spread to the rest of the fund. For instance, if we had a fund that wanted to support say, e-mobility in Zim, and we're saying, no, we don't trust electric buses, we don't want them, we don't even have a feasibility study, the GCF will now come in and say, no, don't worry, we're going to fund this part. So instead of you giving people loans to procure those buses at, say, 15% and 3 years, reduce it to 5% in 10 years, because the money we're going to put is going to reduce the risks that you're talking about, the exchange rate, all those challenges that you're talking about. So the de-risking financing mostly comes from the large climate funds, which I was just highlighting. Second, you've got the innovating financing platforms, particularly which has become one of the major innovating financing platform, carbon credits. What is a credit? This is a ton of carbon dioxide. I think you should have explained this before I came. Yeah, I hope so. A ton of carbon dioxide that has been either offset or sequestrated by forests or any other mechanism, which directly discusses the mitigation dimension, which I was talking about. Now, this is an ecosystem service, which is natural. Trees sequestrate carbon dioxide. And we do realize that trees sequestrate carbon dioxide, but for us to ensure that they are taken care of in the forest, we still have to put a monetary tag to it. So people listen. So a credit, therefore, is a ton of carbon dioxide sequestrated. How does it work? It encourages people to deal with those aspects that support mitigation, which could be planting, taking care of forests, or switching the types of energy that you use, or dealing with any mechanism, for instance, changing the type of feed that you feed your livestock to reduce methane and so on. And you are encouraged to do this because you will earn credit. So the credits are then traded on platforms that are either voluntary or compliance-based by nation. So voluntary is market-based. So the credit is traded market-based. Compliance is based on the government, where a certain government can come in and say, Zimbabwe, we need so many credits. We need 15 billion credits, and we have got, say, 1.4 billion for it. We're going to lock our credit value at $52 a credit, and anyone who supplies credits to the quality that we want, we're going to give them $52 per credit. That's the compliance market. Voluntary market, demand and supply. So these credits now differ in terms of quality in accordance to the people who certify them. Unfortunately, none of them are on the continent. So mostly Vera, Gold Standard, and SAPO. So they determine if for sure, if you're saying you are removing certain amounts of carbon dioxide, you have indeed removed those amounts of carbon dioxide, and then they give you a certificate. This is the certificate that you trade. Government of Zimbabwe takes 30% even before the trade starts. A lot of discussion around that. So there are innovative methods of raising finances, you see? So the idea is, if I have a project, for instance, I want to start a fleet of electric buses in Harare, I don't have the money, I can forward finance that. If I am able to calculate the amount of credits that I'm going to make, then I can go to people who actually have the money, who would say, no problem, we'll finance you, but we will get the credits. Because we want to trade the credits, we want to make money out of the credits. Again, it brings the dilemma of are we really still taking care of the environment, or not just making money? Brings us to the South Pole scandal. Green bonds. Green bonds are now financial space instruments that we now use again to try and promote the idea of doing green business. So the green bond is a normal bond. It's a normal bond, but that is directly focused on a particular activity that we say contributes towards climate change mitigation or climate change adaptation. The beauty about it, we're starting to move into stages where we can get AAA certification for it for different mechanisms. For instance, it is able to earn carbon credits. So is it possible for this bond to actually be different from other bonds and have higher interest rates, higher returns, and so on, because of that dimension that it is able to earn something else that the other bonds cannot earn? Now, when we do all these things, particularly when we are starting with the likes of the GCF and so on, most people get very frustrated when they get there and they're trying to get financing for certain things. And then they're told, no, the GCF will not finance this because there is no additionality. So every time when we discuss green financing, we're always able to be discussing the issue of additionality. I'll give you an example. No matter how good a dam is and supports irrigation, supports production in the lean season because there is water, the GCF will not finance a dam because they say there is negative additionality. The dam is totally destroying the ecosystem. So why should we finance something like that? But for us, we want the dam, you see? So every time when you approach these people, then you have to understand that there are certain things they will not finance. They will only finance that component that is a result of the climate changing. You want to finance roads. They will not finance a general road. They will finance the additionality that results in the road being swept away. For instance, we can say we are not going to do asphalt roads because they're going to be swept away by the rains. So we need concrete roads, but we need 40% extra to make the concrete road. They'll only finance the 40%. See? So we separate the development process from the green process. We are saying development is already the role of government. So we're not going to come in to help you improve your food security. No, we're going to come in to help you improve your food security between September and November only. The rest you're supposed to do yourself. So we come in to deal with those challenges that are a result of droughts, those challenges that are a result of climate-induced disaster. The last one that I wanted to talk about was the movement towards market-based systems, loan-based financing. So the GCF, everyone, you look at the AFDB, everyone is talking about the private sector should get into the green economy. The private sector should start participating. Then we say, hang on, but they caused this. So if they come in, what do we mean? So we're starting to see a serious movement towards Wall Street that is green. But what does this mean for us? It means that all the other ideals of collateral, rankings, everything that made it difficult for you to get financing, if you're in the global south before, you're also going to find it difficult to get green financing because of all those standards that have been put up. So we bring back again the financial apartheid that we saw previously in this space again. So now, how does this happen? Almost every project now has to have co-financing from the private sector. And the private sector has to believe that you are a good person, a low-risk person, all the dimensions. So now GCF comes and says, okay, so you are applying for 50 million. How much is your co-financing? We say, but we don't have much. Remember, we only have 10. They say, no, but those guys have 20 million co-financing from so and so and so and so, because they have those linkages that allow them to get into that space. So there is need now to start advocating for the idea that when we are discussing climate finance, the pledges that were made, for instance, the pledge to make sure we have 100 billion every year towards climate finance is respected so that the global south is able to get the necessary financing. If we move in the direction that we're moving, for instance, at the bank, we are accredited to finance anything up to 50 million. We finance anything up to 15 million. We work with you, we write a proposal, we take it to the GCF, they bring in the money. If the proposal is good after 4 years, and we get this 50 million, we work with you, you use this money, but you have to pay it back. Because our accreditation is only loan-based, guarantee, or equity. So the international accredited entities such as the UNDP and others are the only ones who can do grants. So this technically means for us it's very difficult to get into the rural space, to get into the development space, to get into the adaptation space, because most of the people who need support there don't have the ability to pay back. So we are naturally forced, therefore, to start favoring mitigation projects. Or we have to push for those sort of projects that we can monetize. The adaptation projects that we can monetize. So what have we been doing? In the loan-based financing, we've been trying to monetize adaptation projects by bringing in technical off-takers from the private sector in the middle. For instance, we want to provide water to a community, but we can't do it for free. So we go and ask Schweppes to come and resuscitate an irrigation scheme. And then through the irrigation scheme, we bring water from the dam. And then from the small pipelines, the community gets something, which technically is not really fair, but that is the best way to do it so that it fits the loan-based financing. All right. Thank you very much. I don't know if I should stay for questions. Okay.
Yeah. And whenever there's money involved, there has to be lots of questions. But great presentation.
Thank you.
Opening up the floor here, and then we'll go to the guys online. Any questions for Dr. Dube?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for an interesting presentation. I'm Hugo from Art Farm Agricultural Research Trust. So I'm interested in how you measure ecosystem services, what methodologies you might accept, what you're looking at, and what the problems are that you find with, putting a value on natural capital.
Okay. that is a given. It's been a very long standing question. We do it based on what we value as humans, which obviously is not the full value of the ecosystem. So whatever it is that we pick out and say this we like, this we like, this we like, that's all we're going to value. So the total economic value theory then says, but you're leaving out so much. This is why we have decided that when we're dealing with sustainability issues, it is better to deal with environmental sustainability where we leave the ecosystem intact. So what has this done? This is now trying to move us from the idea of carbon credits to biodiversity credits. Carbon credits are a bit unfair because we already have forests in the global south, and they'll tell you, no, we are not going to give you a credit for a forest that is already there. But this forest is sequestrating. No, we're not going to do that. We're only going to give you a credit for the additional saplings that you plant, for the additional trees that you take care of. What has been there, don't worry about it. It's God's stuff, but that is also our stuff. You know what I mean? So the biodiversity credit now brings in a different dimension. We are now going to give you a credit for the protection of the entire ecosystem, which is where I think you'll be going to. Like, let us give a bigger value to the ecosystem and not just value the components that we find useful. So if you look at the work that has been done previously by the like of Costanza and team, they just looked at those things that we like. And the perception and the valuation of ecosystem services to date is based on what we human beings find it valuable. So that is the actual the definition that is standing at the moment. Those things that are useful to humanity.
Thank you for the presentation. I just, Rodney from the Agricultural Partnership Trust, I just want to get maybe your perspective on the opportunities for project finance to finance some of these huge infrastructure projects as we talk about transport, electric buses, talk about power. These are quite capital intensive projects. What are the opportunities of project finance, and what are the challenges that we've been facing in Zimbabwe and maybe Africa to attract project financing for some of these projects?
But I think the point you're raising is it's risky. It's risky, particularly for the private player, the private sector. So as a result, most of these projects do not get financing because it is said that no, that is a risky destination. You cannot send finance to that place, it will not work. So what do? We turn to the GCF, the multilateral climate financing platforms, who are ideally created to support that sort of financing. Where things are very difficult, come in and help us. So the GCF, the Adaptation Fund, all the other funds are ideally supposed to come in to finance that. But things changed. They now require a significant portion of co-financing so that the private sector also comes in. So what do they say now? They say they are not going to finance the project, but they're going to finance the additionality. So, for instance, we have the Harare Chitunguza Light Rail project, which has been on the cards for a while. It needs about 3 billion to get started. The AFDB has already done a lot of work and said this is a good project, but now they need 5 million for a feasibility study. They need about some money as well for some other things for phase 1. But they will not get any money until they get a guarantee. Is it? So this is when now they come to us as the IDBZ. Then we go to the GCF and say, listen, we don't want you to finance everything, but at least finance the guarantee that will now then allow the private sector players to come in. So we have technically changed it again to become a private sector initiative, whereas it was ideally supposed to be the GCF be given 100 billion a year by the Global North to help us finance all these things. So an example is the case of Senegal. I think about 3 months ago, they got financing for solar buses in Dakar. But of that financing, I think the GCF only contributed about 15%. The rest was private this, World Bank that, private that. So it really depends on how well connected you are to the people who have money. And for instance, now the Green Writers, the Green Bond Underwriters League will not look at a project that is less than 200 million. See? So for us, how many $200 million projects do we have? Not many. So it's very difficult to attract financing into the project, though you can get support to deal with that project, such projects through the multilateral climate finance systems, such as the Green Climate Change, but they will only finance the additionality. You need to have a strong co-financing component.
Any other questions? Anything online, Michael?
All right.
Before you sit down, okay, You mentioned something about accredited auditors or something, and I think you pointed to someone in the audience and saying FBC was on their way. Maybe you could just elaborate a little bit on that? Sorry, putting you on the spot. Here we go.
Sorry. Many platforms where we meet. Thank you very much.
You'll revenge.
Yeah, I think for rightly put that accreditation to the Green Climate Fund is a process. It takes time. It needs patience, and I think it starts also where you have a nomination from the government, which nominates. I think in the case of IDBZ, to say you want to get accreditation for this category. I think something maybe in terms of the 50 million cap that you presented. There's a micro, which is about 10, small, about 50, medium, 250, and the large beyond that. So you choose based on
yes.
Millions, yeah. USDs, you choose based on the capacity that you are also able. I think different circumstances. Maybe that's your cue as well, because we are also in the process of that. And then the whole process around project pipeline development, looking at the bankable projects and bring them together, mitigation, adaptation, and the whole politics around how to access the funds and who to also team up with. I think in the case, we are also learning from IDBZ and seeing to what extent we can also put through and which categories can we also pick out so that at least there's a blend in terms of how we are also approaching and accessing climate finance. I'll maybe stop from there. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And probably another question, and this is to the audience. The development space, where is the funding for the climate smart agriculture, the green sort of funding coming from? And I mean, several of you raised your hands this morning. I mean, how are you accessing that? Be interesting to hear from members in the audience. Who wants to volunteer? What about the Germans? Is it USA? Is it EU?
One of them. I can say something if you want.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm David from the European Union. So it's not accessing, we are giving. So I would say. So we have these bilateral programs, in this case with the government of Zimbabwe, and we have a yearly or 7-year program in which we have jointly agreed on some priorities, amongst them climate smart agriculture, and then there is a portfolio on that. There is a budget allocation that is then I would say well, it's financed through implementing partners, and that's it's based on programmatic of 7 years and all that. Yes, and then implementing partners, they know. Yeah, and it's not a loan; it's a grant. Yeah. In the case of this upcoming, we are in a half. So on the green, if you want the green portfolio, considering natural resources and agriculture and so on, we are talking about some 60 million euro. Yes.
Is that for Zimbabwe?
Yes, of course, for Zimbabwe. Yeah. Thank you.
Final questions? You're all good? Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. All right. Cheers.
So thank you to those of you who are online today. Appreciate your attendance, even though it's online. For those of you who came in a little bit later, please can you just put your name and details down on the attendance sheet. And let's take the opportunity to network. We know kind of vaguely who's in the room now. Great opportunity to just talk about the passionate subject of sustainable agriculture and how we can potentially finance it. But also just to remind all of you, we do meet once a month. We have these forums, and the next one is on third Thursday of April. Okay, but otherwise, wishing you all the very best. And Easter is just next week. Is it a holiday? Anyway, we'll let you know. And if you're not a member, please sign up. We've got the secretariat here with Tony and Michael, and enjoy the networking and meeting new people. Thanks for attending. Cheers, everyone. Yeah.